welcome to Biz Jet TV. I'm your host Fabrizio Poli, and welcome to this episode where today I'm going to be telling you a private jet horror story. I say, what? You're going to be talking about when you flew Dracula? or some terrorist of some sort? No. This is a very interesting story from which we are going to learn some very important points. So, you've heard me talk about, the jets on this channel, which jet to buy, how private jets work, the pilots and everything. Well, today I'm going to be talking about this horror story, which is really interesting. So, it's a friend of mine was flying for this a billionaire, flew for him for about 15 years, and the last few years was getting pretty stressful because the airplane they're operating is a long distance airplane. I'm not going to disclose the type or anything because I don't want you to figure out who the owner is. So they were doing a lot of flights from like Japan to Italy and back and forth and then to LA and all over the place really. And for a while they operated 2 pilots, then they brought on a 3rd pilot. And this friend of mine was flying constantly. The airplane was chartered out when the boss wasn't using it. So this friend of mine ended up flying 650 hours. But he was doing a really good job as a chief pilot. He was managing to coordinate things like when they landed, he would let the yacht captain know ahead of time where they were going to be landing. He would coordinate with the helicopter pilot, so as soon as they landed, the helicopter was there to pick him up and then take him straight to the yacht and all this kind of thing. And he was organising all these things. He timed things right down to the last minute. He knew what flight level to fly at to pick up a few extra knots of tailwind, so they would get in like 5-6 minutes before the airport would shut. He knew, which flight levels to pick so that they'd manage to go direct from one location to the other without having to do a fuel stop. And and over time, he flew this long haul airplane for about 8 years. He really learnt to understand not only how this airplane worked, but what his boss wanted, what his boss needed, how their business worked, how it was so important to coordinate things between the helicopter, the airplane, and the yacht. And the different guests that were flying and what their needs were. So, everything was running like a Swiss clock. But constantly, this friend of mine was fatigued. So he approached the boss and said, look, we really need a 4th pilot. We really need to be, have a roster here where it's 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. But no, the boss was insisting that this friend of mine was doing nearly every flight. Now, fortunately enough, this friend of mine is not married, doesn't have any children. So he didn't have a family to go back to. But, this was tiring him out. To the extent where the boss was, freaking out a bit with a couple of one of these new flight attendants who was very professional in that. And this friend of mine, it'd been a while he'd been complaining, and he'd been talking to me about, what had been going on. And I said, I don't understand why you're still there. So one day he decided, you know what, I'm going to leave and, just take a break for maybe 6-7 months. Then have a look around, see what else there is. And he had another business as well, so he didn't have any financial problems, so he could afford to just walk away. So he walked away, and the boss was not too happy. They didn't do anything to try and keep the guy. They took on some other pilots, and that's when the horror story begins. So now they're flying from Japan back to northern Italy, and the pilot decides that they needed to do a fuel stop. So they have this fuel stop, which adds another 45 minutes to an hour onto the flight. And then when they're coming back into Italy, the airport they were supposed to fly to was already shut, so they had to divert somewhere else. And then by the time they landed, the crew were out of hours, so the boss needed to be sent by car or by helicopter, I can't remember what it was, to his house, which didn't go down very well. This happened once, twice, 3 times. The pilot got fired. Then the airplane started to have problems because the new pilots that they brought on hadn't really figured out how the airplane worked. So it kept getting one tech problem after the other, which was causing a number of delays. And then one day they're sitting in Nice, ready to go up to Paris, and with a number of guests on board, and the airplane breaks down again. And so they had to charter an airplane to go there. So over the course of like 6 months, one horror story after the other. And obviously, when you're buying a private jet, you operate a private jet, the whole idea of the private jet is to get you in and out quick. It's to give you that flexibility. And, if you're now used to, over the course of 7-8 years, flying directly from Japan to northern Italy without having to make a fuel stop. And then suddenly, the new pilot, says, "I know we need a fuel stop," and this is putting more hours onto the day. It's tiring you out, or you've got guests on board, you need to fly somewhere, and the airplane breaks down. You've got to try and you're not going to look good. You're not going to look good. So we sat down with this friend of mine, and we calculated how much money it actually cost his boss. The fact that this friend of mine is no longer there. The fact that he insisted on not hiring a fourth pilot. If he'd hired the fourth pilot and put everybody on a 2 weeks on, 3 weeks on, 3 weeks off roster, it would have kept everybody happy, everybody rested, people would have stayed there. I mean, what's an extra pilot going to cost you? I mean, $250,000, something like that. But this has cost his boss, and this is just in, between operating costs and lost deals and whatever, it's probably cost him in the region of $10 to $15 million over 6 months. So that's something you need to consider. I had another friend I was talking to the other day. He was offered a job on a Global 6000 for $350,000 a year salary, which you'd say, wow, that's pretty good money. And the downside is it was just going to be 2 pilots on standby 24/7, 365 days a year. So yes, you're paying $350,000 to be a slave. So he turned it down, of course, but this is a very experienced pilot. Turned the position down. Now, this owner, I don't know what this owner is thinking. They spent $40 million to buy a Global 6000, and they think they're just going to operate it with 2 pilots. Yeah, they'll probably find 2 guys, but then, after 6 months, another. And it's so important. I mean, the reason why the other friend of mine, the one, whose boss now is going through the horror story, works so well, because he'd been with this, I knew the aircraft. He'd been flying it for a number of years. He knew the boss, knew what the boss wanted and everything. And there's so much value in that kind of thing. But these people, you need to find them, you need to pay them good money, you need to treat them well so that they can stay and keep performing for you. So this is really, really important. So, this horror story is probably more horror stories out there. And if you're a pilot and you're watching this and you have a horror story to tell, please let me know. And I'd love to have you on my show to tell the horror story. If you can, otherwise just send me an email and I'll tell your story. But there's so many of stories like this out there, and you that are watching this video, that you're thinking of buying a private jet and you're all focused on the jet, remember that the pilots and the maintenance people and the cabin crew, all those are part of the equation. The jet is only one element to it. But at the end of the day, you're buying more time, you're buying more energy, and energy is also important because you get in and out quick. You save lots of energy as well as time, so that when you go in to the business deal, you've got the energy to go in there, negotiate, get the deal done, make the money, expand your business, scale your business, provide more jobs for more people, etc., and make the world a better place. But you need the energy as well as time, and that's what the private jet does for you. But if the human factor in the jet, pilots are the wrong pilots, this jet's going to break down. There's going to be problems, and you'll end up having a horror story just like the one I've just told you. So that's all from me on this episode of Biz Jet TV. If I haven't done so already, I'd just like to wish you all a Merry Christmas, as it's the Christmas season. Christmas is coming up tomorrow. So those of you that celebrate Christmas, have a Merry Christmas. And those of you that don't celebrate Christmas, just have a great day. And that's all from me here. And if you haven't subscribed, I encourage you to subscribe to Biz Jet TV. Click on the bell so that you'll be notified when we publish the new videos. And remember, we publish every Tuesday and Friday on Biz Jet TV. So tune in, give us a thumbs up and comment below. We love to hear from you. We love to hear your comments. And that's all from Fabrizio Poli at Biz Jet TV. And I'll see you on the next one.